John, thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for all your inspiration with the Trusted Executive Foundation over the last couple of years. Actually, I think I've been a member for the last 5 years, I believe. But thank you so much for joining us today, John. So John, you and I have a little, I'm going to hand over to you because you've got roughly 10 minutes presentation, and then we're going to follow with a Q&A. So over to you, John.
Great. Thank you, Jonathan. Absolutely delighted to be here. Really excited to be working in partnership with Bench. I was just listening to Anita talking about looking out of the window and seeing Table Mountain in the distance. If I look at my window here, out of my window, I see the Birmingham Stratford Canal with a couple of empty shopping trolleys sticking out of the top. So, you know, we're not quite as glamorous here in Birmingham, but I am joining you from the Trusted Executive Foundation studio, more commonly known as the little room above the garage. But I'm absolutely delighted to be here and talking to the audience this morning about 9 habits for the new world of work. Could I have the next slide, please, Anita? Sorry, Sally. Yeah, the last time that I collaborated with Bench and with Jonathan was on April 10th, 2019 in Russell Keimer at the AHIC conference. And Jonathan will remember, and those of you who were there that day will remember that I took a rather bold move at that conference because I actually sang on stage for the first time in my life. And I actually channeled my inner Bob Dylan on April 10th, 2019. And after the session, Jonathan came up to me and said, John, that was great, but don't ever sing again live on stage. But I'm thinking we're not sort of live on stage today, are we? It's sort of a virtual event. And I'm not sure that Jonathan put it in the contract that I couldn't sing on a virtual event. So I'm just going to remind you of the words that I sang on April 10th, 2019 from Bob Dylan. Come gather around, people, wherever you roam, and admit that the waters around you have grown, and accepted that soon you'll be drenched to the bone. If your time to you is worth saving, and you better start swimming, or you'll sink like a stone, for the times they are a-changing. So I sang that song in Russell Keimer in 2019. I talked about the times they are a-changing, and that was before 2020. So let's not fool ourselves that things weren't already changing before 2020, but 2020 has certainly accelerated and turbocharged all the trends that we were talking about back then in 2019. Now, I'm not going to sing again today, I promise you that. But if I was going to channel one 60s guru for you today, it wouldn't be Bob Dylan, it would actually be Jim Morrison. Because as we know from Jim Morrison in his song, LA Woman, talked about Mr. Mojo Rising, which I didn't realize is actually an anagram of Jim Morrison. But Mr. Mojo Rising is what Jim Morrison sang. And this conference today is all about us being that Mr. and Mrs. Mojo and rising strong for 2021. It's been an incredibly tough year. And we know that the NHS has been on the front line of the health crisis, but you in the hospitality sector have been on the front line of the economic crisis. I read this morning on BBC News, 819,000 jobs have been lost in the UK in this pandemic, and a third of those have been in the hospitality sector. And I'm sure that figure has been replicated all around the world. So you have taken the biggest hit. You could be forgiven for feeling weary, depressed, exhausted, hopeless. You could be forgiven, in the words of Bob Dylan, for being drenched to the bone and sinking like a stone. That's why we wanted to work with Bench today to bring together some great speakers from our network to dry you down and lift you up. And I want to get the ball rolling with my Mr. Mojo Rising topic, 9 habits for the new world of work. Next slide, please, Sally. So this is my favorite image from the first wave lockdown. It was a dreary Saturday morning in April. I woke up to see this photo on my LinkedIn feed. This picture had been taken by a joyful LinkedIn user in the village of Pathankot in northern India, who had woken up that morning to see something they had not seen for over 30 years, the Himalaya mountain range. This beautiful sight had been obscured from view for 30 years due to the smog that normally hangs over Pathankot, but had magically cleared in lockdown. As I looked at this picture, it reminded me of the quote from the author Marcel Proust, which says, "The real voyage of discovery consists not in seeking new lands, but in seeing with new eyes." The real voyage of discovery consists not in seeking new lands, but in seeing with new eyes. The villagers of Pathankot woke up in lockdown and they saw with new eyes. And I think the challenge for all of us today is, what new eyes do we need to see with to transform the future of not just the hospitality sector, but indeed the future of business as a whole? For the irony of this photo is that the smog has cleared in lockdown, and smog is a product of what I call the industrial age. The industrial age has given us many great things, but it also gave us smog. The clearing of the smog in lockdown is symbolic of the shift from the industrial age to the social age. Almost 1.5 million people have died of coronavirus around the world. There has been massive suffering. I don't know about you, but I think we owe it to ourselves to snatch a silver lining from this experience. What could ever make sense of the year that we have been through? But we as leaders need to make sense of this for others, and we need to create a big enough vision to make this all worthwhile. Maybe this picture gives us a clue to the nature of that vision. Maybe now is exactly the right time for organizations like ours to seize the moment and accelerate this transition from what we have been to what we want to become. In this way, we're not just transforming the future of the hospitality sector. Your future is being transformed for you by a bigger shift, the shift from the industrial age to the social age. Therefore, your challenge is not to create a shift, but to adapt to a shift that is already happening outside of your world. Managers manage, leaders anticipate. Next slide, please, Salim. Another way of seeing with new eyes and understanding this bigger shift is to read Kate Raworth's fabulous book, Donut Economics, 7 Ways to Think Like a 21st Century Economist. At the heart of Kate's work is this simple donut diagram. Kate suggests that in the industrial age, the singular measure of success was GDP, and this led to organizations whose own singular measure of success was profit. Like a set of Russian dolls, this simple model pervaded all levels of our thinking, to the extent that we stopped seeing with new eyes. We stopped being able to see at all. Yet the reality is that this model is reaching 2 natural limits. Firstly, the outer ring of the donut has 9 ecological ceilings that are asserting themselves. Issues such as climate change, pollution, biodiversity loss, which we heard about from Paul in the opening address. Secondly, the 12 social foundations are asserting themselves. Issues such as health, gender equality, social justice. In between these limits, Kate has described something, a vision that she calls a safe and just place for humanity. And that safe and just place is the new measure of success in the social age. If you think of the 2 biggest issues of 2020, the pandemic and Black Lives Matter, these are issues of safety and of justice, social justice. And I think whatever happens in 2021, we will not stop seeing this trend to seek a safe and just place for humanity. And that will continue to disrupt and require innovation and courage from leaders in all sectors. So to summarize that shift from the industrial age to the social age, I just want to quote a passage from an article called The Remarkable Rise of Environmental, Social and Governance Issues by George Kell in Forbes. And he said, the big challenge for most corporations is to adapt to a new environment that favors smarter, cleaner and healthier products and services, and to leave behind the dogmas of the industrial era, where pollution was free, labor was just a cost factor, and scale and scope was the dominant strategy. Now, as we start to see the end game of this pandemic, it is exactly the right time for organizations and leaders to accelerate into the next leg of this journey. Next slide, please, Salim. So we've looked at this shift from the lens of the Himalayas. We've looked at it through the lens of the donut economics. Let's finally look at this shift through the lens of your leadership. And this is where I need to appeal to your bravery and your boldness. The industrial age requires leaders to be agents of GDP, engaged in the singular pursuit of maximizing profits on behalf of the owners of the organization. In the social age, you're going to be required to transform yourselves from agents of GDP to stewards of that safe and just space. And a steward is defined as one who rises above the level of an agent and is committed to the welfare of all stakeholders. What's key to understand about the difference between an agent and a steward is that agency is a power-based model, whereas stewardship is a trust-based model. And that's why what you see on this slide is my favorite quote on trust from Charles Green: leaders can no longer trust in power. Instead, they must rely on the power of trust. Now, here's the rub. This is an ideological choice. You can't be half pregnant. You have to be all in. You're either playing the game of power or you're playing the game of trust. And if you're not all in, then sooner or later, you'll be accused of trust washing, greenwashing, woke washing. You'll be accused of laying a thin veneer of trust over an inherently agency model, rather than creating the solid oak of trust-based leadership. At the Trusted Executive Foundation, we're a not-for-profit that exists to help leaders build that solid oak of trustworthy leadership. And if you're bold enough to want to take this on, then we have a secret sauce that can help you convert the vision into a practical reality. Next slide, please, Sally. Here is the secret sauce, the only academically verified behavioral model of trust in the world. I did not dream this up over a glass of red wine and some strong cheese. It came out of 6 years of interviewing CEOs, surveying board level leaders, and crunching the numbers to generate a reliable and holistic list of the 9 habits of trust. And the research says that if you master these habits and you get that leadership trust R number above 1, you will generate a high trust culture. You will create that psychological safety that will lead to the highest performing teams. So our clients use this model to convert trust from an emotive, abstract word into a practical and pragmatic checklist and roadmap. They use it as an individual tool, a team tool, and a lever of cultural change, because they know the tone is set at the top. I'm not going to go into all of these habits today, but suffice to say that no individual can be perfect at all 9 habits, and we've all been conditioned in that power-based agency model. So a lot of what we need to do as leaders as we emerge into this social age is to unlearn the habits of power and learn these raw habits of trust, whether they're habits of ability or habits of integrity or habits of benevolence. Next slide, please. Now, I'm sure some of you are thinking, hang on a minute, John, it sounds like a lot of hard work at a pretty deep level to unlearn the habits of power and learn the habits of trust. Why would we rock the boat and risk going on a journey like this? Well, I can answer that question in many ways. I could show you slides like this one and say that, you know, Dr. Paul Zach's research demonstrated that high trust cultures have 74% less stress, 13% less sick days, 50% more productivity, 76% more engagement. I could show you other slides that talk about equally impressive statistics for the impact of trust on customer loyalty, attracting top talent, creativity, and profitability. Trust is a magic wand. But really, the biggest prize I see for you is that you could become the most trusted leaders in your sector. You could measure this. You could prove it. You could be famous for it. And if you did that, you would be playing a pivotal role in transforming not just the future of the hospitality sector, but the future of business, full stop. And if that's not a vision that gets you up out of bed on a cold winter's morning in lockdown, shouting, hell yeah, then I don't know what is. But of course, I'm a little biased. Final slide, please. Sally, thank you. So as you go into the rest of this conference and you think about leadership, motivation, and finding your mojo, I invite you to remember the villages of Pathankot and recognize that it is a time to see with new eyes. Last week, I delivered the keynote address to the top 200 leaders at Fidelity Investments. I went on straight after Ann Richards, the CEO. And what I remember from Ann's address most significantly was when she said, we are already in the new normal. It's happened. The ship has sailed. Nothing will go back to the way it was. So may you seize the opportunities that are coming to you as the future is transformed from the industrial to the social age. May you make trust, not power, the currency of your leadership. May you set the tone from the top with boldness, bravery, compassion, and curiosity. may use the 9 habits model to change what you are to what you were to what you want to become. On behalf of all at the Trusted Executive Foundation, thank you for being believers in the power of trust. Thank you, Jonathan and Benj, for being the wonderful ambassadors for trust that you are in the hospitality sector. Have a fabulous conference. Carpe diem.
John, thank you so much. Your singing has improved since AHIC and Russell Cameron. So actually,
I've got some good
special
effects here, John.
Yeah, with a few more events, I think you could actually be topping the charts. Now, the ship has sailed. You mentioned the leaders can no longer trust in power. Instead, they must rely on the power of trust. Do you think that business leaders are stepping up to fulfill their potential as agents of trust, or are they slipping back into the old habits of leadership?
I think it's a very mixed picture, Jonathan, at the moment. I mean, we work with hundreds of leaders all around the globe. What you notice is that everybody is realizing it's a time to make a choice. We've talked a lot in our conversations about pivoting. We know that in 2020, the pendulum has swung right to one extreme because of lockdown. Now it's going to swing back, but every leader needs to decide where do they want to stop that pendulum. In terms of the design of their business, the design of their working world, their commitment to the future way of working, and these trust-based models, everyone's got a choice. And I think the most challenging thing, but also exciting thing for leaders is that it is a time to make big choices. And the choices you make in the next 2 or 3 months, I think are going to set the scene for the next 2 or 3 years. So I encourage all business leaders to really think hard. Don't sleepwalk into this new world of work. Make conscious choices, because this is a once in a lifetime opportunity to reset and to go forward in a way that you will look back on and say, yeah, we called that one correctly.
You mentioned in your book, John, the Trusted Executive. I thought a little bit of promo for that. Thank you for sending that to me the other day, your new version, so appreciate that. But in it says, Jack Walsh, ex-CEO of General Electric, said, a leadership is all about 2 words. It's all about truth and trust. Who is your business hero that is leading the way and following your 9 leadership habits that inspire results, relationships, and reputation?
Well, that book that you kindly showed there, John, the foreword of that book is written by Paul Polman, the former CEO of Unilever. Paul stood down from that role last year, but he'd had a 10-year tenure as the leader of Unilever, one of the largest global corporates in the world. And I think Paul is the poster child of this movement. I mean, he is the single person I think who's done the most in corporate life to not only talk about the theory of the new model of business, but actually to put that into practice. And on his watch, not only did the share price of Unilever rise from £12 to £44, but he also halved the carbon footprint of Unilever globally. And they're on track to lift 1 billion people out of poverty by 2021, which is their triple bottom line goal for a wider contribution to society. So I think if anybody wants to look at a real life story of this, then Unilever, Paul Polman, if you Google that, listen to Paul and listen to that story, he shows that it's possible that doing good is also good for business. And I think that's a fantastic message for us all.
Okay. Another comment in the book, quote in the book, was Covey has claimed that trust is the one thing that changes everything. Trust is the magic wand. However, if this is the case, why, as you state in your book, don't we measure the leadership habits of trust?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I interviewed over 70 CEOs as part of my research. Every one of them, I asked the question, how important do you think is trust to the success of your business? Every one of them said it's critical. The next question I asked them was, do you measure this in your organization? And not one CEO was measuring trust directly. They were measuring it sort of indirectly through proxy measures like, customer loyalty, employee retention, etc. But there were no KPIs directly on trust. And to be honest, John, that was one of the motivations for my research, was to come up with a model that is sufficiently robust that you can use it to measure trust. And those 9 habits, we have a survey tool that we use that we can now measure and benchmark trust across businesses and across sectors. And I think that as businesses realize that trust is that key to the future, then we'll do what we've always done in business. What is treasured is measured. And as we realize that trust is something to be treasured, I think the smart organizations will start to measure it. But it's going to take us some time to get to that point.
Thank you for that, John. One final question I've got here. What was the fire that burned inside you to complete a doctorate on trust, to write this Trusted Executive book, and to launch the Trusted Executive Foundation?
Yeah, this is a story that I tell in the book. I tell that story on page 9 of the book. It's my why, as Simon Sinek would call it. In my last corporate role, as you mentioned at the beginning, I was international managing director in a FTSE 100 organization. I was walking down the corridor one morning on a Monday morning in London, and I won't go through the full conversation, but I can summarize it that at the end of that conversation, I was told by my CEO that my biggest problem was I was too effing nice. I stood there in that corridor at that time, sort of with a little bit of head spinning, thinking, what am I being told here? What is the world that I'm being asked to sort of conform to? And is it a world that I would be proud to be a leader in? And that's almost 20 years ago. But I did make the choice at that time that I wanted to find a different way, where it's not a choice between a nice boss or being a nasty boss, but you can actually use trust as the currency of your leadership to achieve results, but also build great relationships and also make a contribution back to society that you can have as a proud legacy. So that comment, that conversation at that time is what really sparked my fire, as you call it, to research, to write, to start the Trusted Executive Foundation, and to work with people like you and to build this tribe, this trust tribe, which I think, the people I've met, there are many brave leaders who are making a stand at this time. It's really inspiring to be part of those communities. And like today, I just hope that, your attendees today pick up that fire, pick up that buzz, and realize that you're not alone, in wanting to create something different and to think about leadership in a different way.
Well, listen, John, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for being part of our journey, ending the year with our Hospitality Tomorrow 3. Also for helping us to put this program together as well. So, much appreciated. You're going to be on stage later with Marcus Child. Marcus Child is an awesome speaker, and look forward to hearing from that, and look forward to hearing from you grilling Marcus on questions regarding leadership. So thank you so much, John, and we'll see you later. Also, don't forget that you'll see on the program right now that we've got Toggle, who are going to be at their exhibition stand. I think that's at 12:40, and what's the time right now? It's around 12:24. So do join Toggle. They're all about innovation, and they're going to be at their stand.